Okay, this is Shabbos Daf Lamed. We're talking about what you can do within a bathhouse, what you can't do in a bathhouse on Shabbos regarding heating up the water, heating up yourself. What's interesting about the discussion is that the discussion doesn't go into what about heating yourself up. When a person goes into a hot bath on Shabbos, so he's heating all the liquid inside his body. A person is 70% liquid. He's eating all his organs also. So the question is, does Bishul on Shabbos require that it's done with food? In other words, let's say a person puts a piece of paper near something that is very hot, or he puts an oven mitt and it's only very hot. Is that allowed or not allowed? Because it's not food and it's not cooking, it's just heating up. It's getting very, very hot. So is that allowed on Shabbos? You don't want the heat, you don't want it to burn, you just want it to get hot. You put a piece of a coin in an oven. Is a person allowed to put a coin in an oven on Shabbos, cooking a coin? It's not eating it. So, b'pashtos, it seems like so far that would be allowed because we're not worried about what's going on inside a person's body, because inside a person's body is not normal to cook. A person not eating himself. He's definitely not heating up his body to cook himself. We're going to talk about a case where there's water on the person, there's condensation, and then maybe that got heated up. But as far as a person's heating body, the Gemara doesn't talk about and seems to ignore, seeming to imply, at least for the time being, that there's no problem in trying to cook or burn someone's self. Okay. Rabbi Yitzchak, Ruba, Rabbi Yitzchak the Great, Azal, Michse, in Rebbe. So he went to bathe with Rebbe. So Amar Lei, so Rabbi Yitzchak said to Rebbe, Mahu mitain goy aglata. What is the law regarding putting a flask of oil into the pool? Now, we know oil has a higher heating temperature than water does, but it does still get hotter. So even though it's not going to come to a boil, in other words, you put a flask of oil inside boiling water, it's not going to boil because oil has a higher boiling point. Still, it's going to get hot. The question is, of course, does oil benefit from getting hot? Just heating up oil, what type of benefit is that, really? And could just cooking oil, that really is one of those things I would assume that actually makes it worse. When you boil oil, unless something's in it, it's basically now getting useless. Keep that in the back of your mind. Amarle, so Rebbe told him, Habag goy natla, put some into a ladle, he nasa klisheni. And now we introduce the concept of klisheni. It's a secondary vessel, and you're allowed to cook in a secondary vessel, or at least heat up in a secondary vessel. Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi b'shem Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi said in the name of Yeshua ben Levi, Shoyelen hilchais hamerchatz bebeis hamerchatz. We may inquire about laws pertaining to a bathhouse instead of a bathhouse, even though we might not be dressed properly. But if the halachas pertain to the bathhouse, we could address them. The hilchas beis hakisei bebeis hakisei, and laws pertaining to the latrine or the restroom inside the latrine or restroom. Gahada, as in the following incidents. Rabbi Shimon ben Eliezer al Michse in Reb Meir. So Rabbi Shimon ben Eliezer was bathing with Reb Meir. Amar le, so Rabbi Shimon ben Eliezer said to Reb Meir, Mahu lekaneach, what is the law regarding wiping the floor? So Amar le said to him, Asr. Mahu lahadiach, what about washing the bathhouse floor? Amar le says, Asr, it is forbidden. The luck came, but it didn't occur that Shmuel Shail Rabbi Shmuel asked Rabbi Malanois Amen b'makam bitnuf. What is the law concerning saying Amen in a filthy place, in a place that's dirty or smelly, or a place that you can't you don't stay there very long? V'amar, he says Asr, it's forbidden. The Asr da Amrinan loch Asr. It's also Asr to say Asr. Asr is basically a Torah term. Saying something is forbidden or permitted is a Torah term. So it's usher even in a filthy place to say that. So now the question is, we understand that that's when the places smell and you can't learn Torah there. But is a bathhouse considered a filthy place? It's obviously a place where there's not appropriate to say Torah because of the way people are dressed there. Clearly, a latrine follows that. So therefore, how could we discuss Torah in those places? And this is a dispute. So Ashkach Tani, so a Tana who taught in a Brisa, that Shoylin, Hilchas, Amerchatz, Hilchas, Kisei, Beis Kisei, you're allowed to learn things about a bathhouse and a bathhouse, and about the lavatory and the lavatory. Obviously, that's only b'diavad. Lichatchila, please discuss everything outside when appropriately dressed. But if you're there and the halacha is coming up and you need to know, you could think about and discuss that halacha. In B'yom Tov, Kechamin shachumu b'yom tov. So we taught in the Mishnah that if water flows through a pipe in Tiveria on a Yom Tov, it's not like water that was heated up on the Yom Tov. So chamin shachumu b'yom tov, hot water that was heated on Yom Tov. V'chein chamin shachumu me'erev Shabbos l'Shabbos. Also similar to hot water that was heated before Shabbos for the use on Shabbos. So Rav and Shmuel, Chadamar one says, Marchetz b'hen panav yadav raglav. One may wash with his water his hands and face and feet. V'charna amar. And the other one says, Marchetz b'hen kol gufay avir. You can do your entire body one limb at a time. So v'la yadid man, yadid man. We don't know which one said which one says what. So me and man and the other Shmuel. So since Shmuel taught a brisa that marchetz behem panav yadav raklav, one may wash his hands, face, and feet. Havi Rav do amar marchetz ben gufa. Emerges that Rav is the one who said that a person may wash his entire body with limb by limb. So chad pilois sha'al Rav Kapara. So once there was a philois, a philosopher. That's Aramaic, transliterating the Greek word. There was a philosopher asked Bar Kapara, Avle Cha'al Levi Saricha. Avle, or similarly asked Levi Sarisa. So mutter lishtais. It's mutter to drink from water that was heated on Yom Tov, also lerchais, but it's also to bathe. Why can you do one and not the other? That doesn't make sense. If it's mutter to heat up water to drink it, then it should also be mutter to heat up water to bathe in it. Why can't you do that? Amarleis, so he said to the philosopher, Im tere suris mechabek im ishtecha. If you see a eunuch that was now hugging and being affectionate to your wife, so Shema Einoi Ralach, it's not going to be bad to you. You're going to enjoy it. You think it's going to be great. They could just be friends. Amar Le'ain. He says, yes, it would bother me. Amar Le says to him, Umechi hu lam klum. But you know that he can't do anything. I mean, the best he could do is he could be affectionate to her and hug her. He can't do anything else. He can't violate her. So what's your problem? Amar Le, so he said to Bar Kapara, Shalai tisparetz. That it should not become promiscuous. She should not become promiscuous. She become promiscuous with this one. She gets used to it. Then she'll be with someone who is not a eunuch, and then it's gonna be a big problem. Now you understand the Rabbanan. Now you understand why there are takonis, why there are mitzvahs Rabbanan, why there are gedarim. So Amalei says to him, to the philosopher, also that we should not become indiscriminate. A person should start doing one thing to the next thing, that leads to the next thing, and all of a sudden it's a slippery slope. That's why there are decrees from the Rabbanan. Now you get it. Kevan Shayatza, as soon as the philosopher left, Amrullah to me, the people said to Rav Kapara, Rebbe, Lazeh, the Chisa Bekana, but this one you pushed away as so easily, as if you used to read. Lanu ma'at meshiv, but what do you propose to answer to us if we're going to ask you why you can't bathe on Yom Tif? So Amar Lahem, he says to them, V'haloi kivar nemar, but didn't already say that asher yechel chol nefesh hu levado yesu lachem. You may do things for eichel nefesh, for tzarech nefesh, for yourself. In other words, you could eat and drink, and you prepare things for food and eat and drink on Yom Tif, but you can't just do things willy-nilly. Since in our times it is not the custom of people bathe normally, so therefore bathing is not tzarech nefesh, and therefore you cannot do Yom Tif. However, comes the 21st century. Then when people bathe daily in hot water and they have indoor plumbing, then, and of course their hot water urns and stuff are through a grama, so then bathing on Yom Tif is no problem. Mulyur hagrav shaisen nimenu b'Shabbos. Amalurium, and we talked about that. That was the kli, the kettle kli that has the coals in the bottom of it. One may drink from it on Shabbos if it was shoveled, as long as it was shoveled out. So you had coals, you heat it up, you take out the coals for Shabbos, and now it's retaining its heat. So then you could drink from it on Shabbos. Ha'im enai gruflai. But if it was not shoveled, what's the din? Then is you can't. Why? Amar Rav Shain says, because the coals touch the body of the malarium and heat it up, and therefore that's not going to be good. So Amar Rav Chanina bereid Rav Chilel. Rav Chilel b'fnei shahar ruach because the air enters the malarium and the coals are then ignited. So as you move them around, they come ignited. So there's two things. One is, I think, first of all, buksa, because as you move them, you have the gecholim that are moving and sliding down in the pots. Now you're actually sliding and moving the gecholim. So even though the whole thing is mutter because it's really for the water, but if you're moving them around, that I think then that's the first explanation, that it doesn't really heat up the water more, but it moves around, it billows air or hard air, and maybe then it could then heat up a little bit more. And the other one is the gecholim themselves are going to move around, and they're going to be ignited, and that's a problem. Even though that's not your intent, because your intent is to pour. So now we have that same question that we had before. My intent is not to ignite the coals. My intent is only to tip this and to get the water out, even though by tipping in the water out is very possible that the coals are going to ignite, but it's not my intent. So this must not be according to Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon would say, since your intent was not to heat up the coals, even though that action would probably heat up the coals, therefore he would probably say that it was mutter. Amarav Yosi Brabon. Let's see a third explanation. Asu frakim. Because the malarium is constructed from several parts. So the person, I'm afraid he put it, the adhesive would melt or come apart. He's going to add water around the base to cool it off a little bit to make sure it doesn't overheat. And therefore, that we're worried about on Shabbos. That's we're going to heat that water that you're trying to use to cool, or you're going to cool the bottom. So that's number one and number two. And the first explanation was about the muksa. If it was muksa, because you're moving the column, so those reasons why you cannot use it on Shabbos, and probably also according to Rabbi Shimon. Antiki. Now, an antiki is basically a type of oven that also has a compartment in it that does two things. One is the walls get very, very hot because they're faced with the fire all week long and they retain heat. And the second thing is, in that little compartment is water. So that you can put water in it to heat up the water very quickly. So, antiki, afalpi, grufa ein shaisei menu. And tiki, even if it was shoveled, you not drink from it because they still retains its heat, and that's a problem. Rabbi Chanina, Yosi, Abba, Rabbi Yechanam. So he said this: Mifnei shehi mischayemes mistala, because the water becomes hot from the wall of the antiki, and therefore, as you move the water around, it's gonna be less water and more wall, and it's gonna just become hotter. Rabbanan de Kesaria and Rav Huna b'Shem Rav, im haisa grufa upsucha mutter. If antiki has been shoveled and it's open, then it's permissible because then removing the water is not really going to heat it so much, and then it's going to be allowed. And now we talk to the next halacha. Halacha dalid meicham shepinohu. A kettle that was removed from the fire. Lo yitin l'soicha mayim tzoinim. One may not put cold water in it b'shvil sheyach chemu because it will become heated. Avol noisin hu l'soicha, but you could put inside it, to warm it. So therefore, if you read it plainly, it sounds a lot of water to warm, but not a little water to become heated. But that does not make sense. You're putting in a little water to heat, so how do you know exactly when it's a little water and when it's a lot of water? So it seems most likely is that instead of saying you're pouring water into a kettle that's hot because you want that water to heat, because remember, water mixes. It's not like you could pour water in it, that water gets hot, and you take out that water. Clearly, you're just, what it's saying really is, it's usher to add water because it's going to get heated. So you put in water there to a hot kettle, even if it's off the stove, you're adding the water, that water is going to get hot. So now you have more hot water. What's the soicha? What's the second part? The soicha kais or k'lei lahav rishon. And the soicha, Usoichai means you take it in another kli. In other words, you take it like in a ladle and you dip it into that water, so you warm up the water you have, and now you have warm water in your ladle. Or you put a spoon or something into a cup of hot water, also warming up the water in the spoon and taking it out. That's pashas of how I would read the Mishnah. Because putting in water, you're not going to know exactly the amount. Zakt the Gemara. Mecham she penuyu lo yitel soichatzene. Kettle that was removed, you may not put cold water in it. Let's see. Right, Ba Berei Rav Chia, Ba Rav Chia b'Shem Rav Yechanan. Lo yishanu elo l'soich hakais. They only told us really to put it inside a kais and not into a kettle. Amar Rav Mana. Rav Mana says, Kasha Kumi Rabbi Bab. I pose the following according to Rav Bab. Lo Tani Rabbi Yechanan al Saifa. Rabbi Yechanan did not teach the Mishnah's final part. Lo Tani al Reisha. Did he not teach the first clause? Because it can get heated. Halaf Rishon. So therefore, if you can't do it to get heated, you can't do it to get warm. Asa Rabbi Bara Kahana Rabbi Chia Rabbi Shem Rabbi. So, right? So you say im lachmin aser. If to get hot, it's aser. Im lahafresh mutter. But if it just get warm, mutter. So again, the first ones that read it seems like the same pouring water directly, and that makes no sense. To warm it up, it seems like you're putting it in another kli, dipping it in. Tani was on a brisa. Nice cham in the soichsoine. We put hot water into cold water. In other words, a little bit of hot water into a lot of cold water. We can't put a little bit of cold water into a lot of hot water. The bottom one is going to be a lot, and the top one is going to be a little. According to Beishamai, Ubeisel say, whether you put a little bit of cold water into a lot of hot water, a little bit of hot water into a lot of cold water, but then mutter, then it's okay. What are they talking about? Because how much could you already do to change it to make it heat up? Avol Batia, but regarding a bath, when it actually could get heated up, you put a little bit of hot water into cold water, a tub of cold water, that's fine. But a little bit of cold water into a hot bath of hot water, then it's not allowed. Rabbi Shimon Matir. Rabbi Shimon Manasseh says it's mutter. I said Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Masna, right? So according to Rabbi Shimon ben Masna, Rabbi Yechanan ki Rabbi Yechanan ben Nuri. And Yechanan is like Rabbi Yechanan ben Nuri. Tanu was on a brisa. Rabbi Yechanan ben Nuri. Rabbi Yechanan ben Nuri says, "A male who adam chavis sel mayim v'noisnav kineged hamdura." A man may fill a barrel with water and place it opposite a fire. Loy b'shvil shizcham, not that it should get hot. Aval b'shvil so that it's chilling a wolf. So in other words, it's never going to get hot. You can put it there, no matter how long it stays there, it's only going to get lukewarm. When you don't have a constant fire source of an oven, no matter how hot it was, it keeps decreasing. So it's not going to get the barrel so hot, so therefore it's fine. Yored who Adam the Toivel sign him. If a person went down into cold water and immersed himself, and he came up, but now he wants to warm himself next to the fire, he could do this. The Red Meir. The Chum say it's usher. Red Meir says it's fine. And the Chum says usher because the moisture on his body is going to get warmed up. It's enough to warm up the moisture that's on his body. Now, again, the first question is, one, does his body warm up the moisture? And number two is, does the heat make it even warmer than that? The heat has to make it warmer than his room temperature. So he's going to warm up the cold water regardless by himself to 98 degrees. Now the question is, if the oven's going to make it even hotter than that. Yas Amar Rab Meir. Rab Meir spoke well. Umay Tam Rabbanan. Now what's the reasoning of Rabbanan? Why do they say that it's Asr? So Eve Kaye Demar Rabbi Zeir Rabbi Shem Buddha. So they apply the ruling of the Chachamim, to which Rabbi Zeir said in the name of Yehuda. Mutu lahavra shemoka mishahayot shalates. Now talking about yad shalotes. In other words, the hand's going to retract. This is the hand withdrawing rule. So where the hand rules, where it is the moishel, where it is the sovereign. So then that's fine because it's not so hot. But if it's going to withdraw his hand, that means it's too hot. So now we're talking about the hand rule. So obviously, if he's going next to the fire, it's not that hot because he's sitting next to the fire. He's not obviously backing away because he's not getting burnt. Therefore, the fire's not that hot, and therefore it's fine. So that's no problem. But also, but it's also in a place where he's not going to be able to tolerate over there. And even in a place where his hand is not going to tolerate it, until what point is his hand not tolerated? Rabbi Yudah and Bar Pazi, Rabbi Simon, B'Shem Rabbi Yosi, Ben Chanina, Ad Shehei Noisan Yad L'Soicha Nichvei. It's a place that's so hot that he places his hand there next to the food, and it's scalded. So that's the outlier of the Yad Shleches. Hakol Moedim b'Kli Sheni Shu Mutter. Everyone agrees that with the Kli Sheni, it's mutter to put anything else into it, and that Kli Sheni does not cook. Ma ben Kli Rishon and Kli Sheni. What's the practical difference of Kli Rishon and Kli Sheni? So Rabbi see Kan Hayat Shletes, because Kli Sheni the Yad Shletes, the hand is not going to retract. The hand rules. The Kan and the Kli Rishon ain't Hayat Shletes. The hand does not rule. The hand has to retract. Rabbi Yonah says, "Kan v'kan, any shlut." Just really, the truth is, both of them, it's too hot, and the hand has to retract. So what's going on? Ella asu hercheik l'chli rishon. However, the Rabbanan wants to make a broth or make it a getter from a primary vessel, from a kli rishon, from what's really the hot one that holds the heat. But they didn't start doing it on secondary vessels since the kli sheni it's already poured into one. They didn't want to make it to cut onto that. So once the kli sheni, fine.